My air compressor has a hard time keeping up with my vapor hone cabinet. I have to stop sometimes just to let it catch up. So I'm going to try to add another compressor to this tank. You can see where my old air compressor was sitting and the tank rusted out. So I threw the tank away and saved the compressor and the motor. First I had to build a stand for the compressor and motor. When I converted my portable bandsaw into a benchtop bandsaw, I made this stand that I can use to put anywhere on the bench. So if I'm cutting long pieces, I can put it anywhere I want. It makes it convenient. When you have just one piece to cut that's long, it's a lot more convenient than having to drag out the big bandsaw. I completed all the welds after spot welding everything together and painted it. So I think it's ready to start mounting the motor and the compressor. I'm not an air compressor expert by any means, but where I worked, I had to maintain these two 20 horsepower compressors, so I had to have some knowledge of how they worked to be able to do maintenance on them. Later, our company upgraded to these two Quincy 50 horsepower compressors. They're rotary screw compressors, and they feed one tank. And that's where I got the idea of running two compressors on one tank. So my video is not really meant to be an instructional video, but more of just how I decided to do it. So if you did something like this, do it at your own risk. The first thing I did was make sure all the air was bled out of the tank. Next, I removed the copper tube that feeds the air tank, and it's connected from the compressor to a check valve on the tank. Here I'm removing the unloader line. I'm going to replace it with all new tubing anyway. And what the unloader does is when the air compressor reaches its shut-off pressure, the regulator activates a valve that bleeds the air out of the line between the compressor and the tank, and it helps the check valve close, and that stops the air from the tank back feeding back into the compressor. This is what the check valve looks like when it's in the tank, and the air from the compressor comes out through all those holes that are going around that tube. So if I try to put just a regular coupling on there, it's going to block those holes. So I have to get a adapter to go from 1" to 1/2" so that it has room to breathe. So now I'm going to put a T in the tank so I can run both compressors into the tank. And here I'm using a 1/2" street elbow. All the fittings here are 1/2". And here I'm just putting the rest of the fittings in just for alignment purposes. I'll take them back out and seal the threads later. You can see where I put the adapter on there to give the check valve room to breathe. So I went from 1/2" to 1" and then 1" back down to 1/2" with another adapter. That 1" area gives the check valve room to breathe. Now I have Teflon tape on all the threads, so I'll go ahead and tighten everything down. Now I'm putting the check valve in, and this is the original check valve that went with this tank. And this is the check valve for the add-on compressor. I took this check valve out of the old tank that had a hole in it before I threw it away. I bought this tubing bender that does 1/2 inch and 3/8, and I'm doing 1/2 inch copper, and this is the first time I've ever had to do like precision curves. I spared you the agony of watching me try to bend copper, so maybe when I do the next one I'll show how I did it. I removed the regulator, and I would have liked to have taken that nipple out, but there's really not much to grab onto. So I just put a brass adapter on top of it. Next is a T, so I can run 2 regulators. The original regulator had female threads, so I had to put a male adapter on that elbow. And this regulator had male threads. Now both regulators are installed. When I was watching a tutorial on how to bend copper, I noticed that some of these benders have a block on them that you can mount them in a vise. And this one has a tapered handle, so there's no way to really put it in a vise and have it stay. So I put it in the milling machine and made a flat surface on both sides so that it'll clamp tight in a vise. Now that it's mounted in a vise, it's a lot easier to bend copper. One of the videos I watched, they said to put a light film of oil on the surfaces that makes a smoother bend. For this bend, I didn't want to go too far because it's easier just to bend it a little more if you need to later. This is another bend where you have to be careful you don't go too far. You can always come back and bend it a little more if you need to. Just a little bit more and I think I'll have it. So now all that's left is just to cut off the excess copper. So now I have the stand anchored down to the concrete because you don't want it to move after you have all this copper connected. Well, I finally finished. I got the unloaders hooked up. This one goes to the existing regulator, and this one goes to the add-on regulator. So this add-on compressor starts at 80 and turns off at 120, and this one starts at 120 and turns off at 135. This one's quiet, so I think when I'm working out here in the garage, I'm going to let this one do all the work because I usually don't need more than 120 pounds anyway. And this one is 220 and I've got it hooked up to a switch, so I'll just leave it off unless I'm running the vapor blast cabinet. But I'll show you how loud this one is compared to this one. I can live with this one. This one I need ear protection. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.